I'm here at the intersection of Gothard and Warner. Behind me is one of the oldest and most beloved buildings in Huntington Beach. It actually predates the incorporation of the city. On today's episode of Hidden Huntington Beach, we're going to take you inside.
I'm Chris Epting. I'm an author and storyteller, and I love the history of Huntington Beach, especially the hidden history. For the past 2 seasons, we've helped uncover many little-known stories that help illuminate the past. Now, join us as we dig deeper to discover even more secrets. Welcome to Hidden Huntington Beach, Season 3. The Warner Avenue Baptist Church is one of the most recognizable historic buildings in Huntington Beach. Since 1907, when it was built as the Wintersburg Community Church, and today as the Warner Avenue Baptist Church, it remains a vital part of the community. Pastor Steve Orman was kind enough to have us in to talk some hidden history.
Pastor Steve, we're standing here right next to one of the most beloved and historic buildings in Huntington Beach. It was dedicated in 1907, right?
Yes, it was.
And we're in would have been known as the Wintersburg area then.
Yes.
And there would have really been not much around here. I mean, this building predates the incorporation of the city. What can you tell me about this magnificent church?
They had these revival meetings back in the early 1900s, and there were revivals actually going all around the world at that time, but there was a special one here, and when they got done, they decided to build a church, and the Methodists, there were more Methodists than anybody. So
And it was a Methodist church.
So it was a Methodist church. It was, yeah, I think it was the Wintersburg Community Church, they called it at the beginning, and then it became the Methodist Church.
This area where we're standing back then was known as Wintersburg, and it was primarily agriculture. They were growing celery, lima beans, chili peppers all throughout here. This structure would have been the most substantial thing in the area, right?
Yes.
Probably visible for a very long distance.
Yes, it was the high spot, and this is where everybody was congregating together.
What do you remember about that time then? And do people still come through today that want to sort of revisit past experiences here? So many hundreds of people, thousands of people have come through the church. I would imagine you get people to come back and remember their wedding and services and things like that, right?
A lot of people have been through here. A lot of interesting times people come by and want to visit and go in and say, I went there when I was a kid, or I got married in that church, or I was baptized in that church, or something.
You get a lot of that today.
Yeah, there's still, at least a couple times a year somebody will stop by. We're working on the history of the church a little bit more, and especially the Baptist church part that we have, and we'd love to do a tour sometime, and maybe we'll work that up.
The church is 1907. The house, the manse.
The house is 1912. I don't know too much about the history of it, except, it was the original pastor's manse back then, and since we've been in it, it's been more of the custodial house, but now my son is the assistant pastor and he lives there. It's a lot of work, these old wood structures, but it's beautiful inside, and he's raising his family in there, and it's going well.
So in between the house and the church is this really nice little pocket of land that to me harkens back to what it might have been like 100, 120 years ago. Can we go? Will you show us back there and kind of give people a peek of what it's like to take a step back in time?
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm excited. This is like taking a step back in time. Lead the way, Pastor. Pastor, one of the first things I think about being back here between the church and the house is not a lot has changed right here on this grass since 1912.
Yes.
This is really kind of a weirdly wonderful protected space, right?
Yes, it is.
I mean, if we had been standing here in 1913, these buildings would have been right here.
Exactly.
We may not have had the traffic behind us on Warner, but it would have been very similar, right? Horses clopping by. But what's it like for you being back here? I mean, you spend a lot of time in the house. It's got to feel nice to be attached to 2 such historic structures.
Well, I come down here almost every day. In fact, unless I'm on vacation. and yeah, this is like my second home, being here at the church and at the house with my son and his family. And before that, a while back, my daughter and her family lived there. And so, yeah, we had a lot a lot of special memories in there and in the church.
To me, it's astonishing for a 1907 building. The church is in incredible shape. What kind of work does it take to make?
Well, it takes regular maintenance and a lot of work, and just since I've been here, we've had it repainted like 5 or 6 times. At one point, the paint was so thick we had to scrape it all off and start over.
The Warner Drive-In movie theater used to be right across the street.
Yes.
And kids could watch movies from the top floor of the house here.
I was told that by some of the kids that used to live here a long time ago.
Amazing. And another thing, the proximity of the church on Warner, the way the street's been widened, there have been numerous accidents, right? We were all used to open up the papers or looking online and seeing, a truck or a car going into the front of the church. Talk a little bit about that, because it's become kind of a thing locally.
Yeah, well, we might get the name either as Target Church or Drive-In Church. I don't know. But, well, when they were trying to widen Warner Avenue, they were thinking about moving the church building, and they decided that was going to be too expensive, and so they just squeezed out a lane. But then you got to come these lanes coming.
It is weird,
east, and it's hard, and so when they tried to widen Warner Avenue, they really wanted to move the church, but it wasn't really feasible with the cost-wise. They said the building was in great shape and could be moved, but trying to squeeze in a lane, then coming eastward on Warner, you got to cut across a little, and some people miss it. Other times it's a drunk driver just happens to do it.
Pastor, thank you so much for the history of the church, for letting us come back here and stand in this, what I think is a very sacred space. At this point now, I'm going to go inside the church. One of your church elders has graciously invited us in to give us some more history. So in the meantime, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Well, thanks a lot, Kenneth, for doing us today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Glad to have you.
Kenneth, I've never been in here before, so this is really exciting to first come in and take in your beautiful church. You've been here since what year?
1965, 57 years ago.
Long time ago.
Seems like it, but really not. Time flies by pretty fast.
So what was life like for you here at the church?
We were just young married people. One thing we did is we took up with the youth group, and we were actually kind of part of them for a while, and then as we grew older and the other ones grew up, we became sort of leaders. We were also kind of became friends of the caretakers that lived in the house next door. At that point, only 11 families that had purchased this property. And we were in transition from the ownership of the other church to the Baptist church here. And in that transition, we could use the building on Sunday evening, but not Sunday mornings at first. And then pretty soon, and at that time in the Sunday mornings, we were meeting at the school down the street. And that worked out okay, but my wife and I would walk through here, and we decided to check in,
and you never left.
never left.
The first thing I noticed coming in, the original stained glass. You can see most of the windows, it's still maintained. So that stained glass goes back to 1907.
As far as I know, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What are some of the changes that have taken place here in terms of design and the structure? I mean, are the pews original?
Well, the building is not the church. The church is the people. But historically, it was interesting to see how much they had put into it when they built it at that early time, in the early 1900s. We've had at least 3 changes of pews. The original pews were just hard wooden pews. Had a kind of a little problem in the summer. The varnish would stick to people's backs. But the church, sister church actually in San Diego, had later on were renewing their sanctuary, and they gave us theater chairs, and we had those in here, individual theater chairs, and they were pretty comfortable, fold up, and you could vacuum. Then we got these, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 8 years, 10 years, I don't know. We didn't have carpet. We had floor furnace right here and some outlets up there. We had to upgrade the electrical. Actually, we had some unique ceiling fixtures for the lights, and those served us until, way back, maybe 20 years ago or less, we put the fans in and the lights. But those are the kind of things. Actually, the side rooms over there were open for overflow. We closed those so there could be offices and a nursery and so on.
Wonderful. Now, the Slater family, very important family in Huntington Beach history, lived a couple of blocks down Gothard. You were saying earlier they would actually, Mrs. Slater and her children would come attend services here, right?
Grandmother Slater, she was a member, not, I don't know if she's original or not, of the Wintersburg Community Church here. And that was the house down the street is her house. Her son married, and they lived in Huntington Harbor and farmed the property across there where Ocean View School is now. And then their two sons came as young men and became a part of the youth group that my wife and I were working with. We kind of grew up with the youth group and became more of mentors and leaders, but we were quite young and inexperienced in that in a sense, so.
Wow. Like you say, it's about the people. That's what makes a church,
Yes.
right? I think for me, one of the most interesting parts inside here is located right up front. Would you take us up there and show us exactly what's there? Because it's a real piece of hidden history that's sort of a great community story as well.
Yeah.
Why don't you lead the way up there and kind of show us that history? Kenneth, there's a wonderful story behind the baptismal that's up here. Why don't you talk about it?
The community church that we purchased, they did not baptize by immersion. And the Baptist faith, and according to the scripture, is to immerse the believer, to signify death to the old life and raise to the new life, which doesn't mean that you're completely there. There's a growth process that goes on then. And so we had this installed very shortly after.
How long ago was it installed?
Well, real shortly after we bought the property in '65, so I'm saying maybe '66.
Long time ago.
Yeah, not much longer after we purchased the property. Yeah, over 55 years ago.
Wow. And it's still in use, right? It's
Yes.
still operational.
Yes, we fill it up to right about here.
Wow.
And we recently installed a new pump and a new heater.
Wow.
Water circulates through the heater. Before we had to kind of fill it. We had a 50-gallon tank, and then when that got emptied, we'd wait until that recovered. And so somebody had to be here through the day.
Sure.
And then it would cool off during the night. But now we can turn it on and fill it. And the mural that's there is very appropriate, I think, for it, because the early believers were baptized in rivers or lakes or whatever. And so there was a woman that owned an art supply store down the street. Her name was Mrs. Brodlick. And she was giving art lessons to the pastor at that time and his wife. And somehow they got the idea that a good project would be to paint this mural. And so they did. And actually, I don't know all the details, but there was a little conflict between which trees would be shown as it would be. But actually, I'm really surprised. I mean, they did very well for being early on in their...
Oh, it's wonderful.
And still unchanged. And it was put in, of course, after the baptistry. There was a blank wall there before. And so it's a nice touch.
There's also a story behind the cross hanging here as well, right?
So my son-in-law, Robert, made the cross to hang up there during their wedding about 25 years ago.
Really? So you have personal history
Yeah.
right here. That's wonderful.
And so they they made that cross, and
it's still here today.
yeah, it's still up there
What
today.
a great artifact. What a lovely tribute to your daughter and son-in-law.
Yeah.
It must make you feel good when you see it hanging up there.
Yes, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for having us in today, Kevin. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Yeah, we're glad you could do this.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Hidden Huntington Beach. I've always wanted to go inside that church, so today was something really special. If you want to find even more hidden history, check out our Facebook group. It's simply called Hidden Huntington Beach, and you'll find thousands of stories and pictures and home movies. Lots of great things there. So in the meantime, thanks again for watching.